going on, everyone? Peter Hunt Spitek here from The Gamer, reacting to more of your hottest gaming takes. Let's get right into it. Okay, so this shirt's for sure gonna be a problem with the green screen, right? Okay, let me get changed real quick. All right, first one. But the story is so good is not a reason worthy to play a game. A good story is great, but not what compels me to begin nor continue to play a title. Gameplay trumps all. If it doesn't play well and isn't fun, I won't play it. I think this one totally comes down to like the reason why you play games in the first place. So for me, a game doesn't have to be fun to be good or to be compelling. I think about like Sekiro or Returnal, or I made a whole video about that question a little bit with click holding. Like that game isn't fun, but like it is good and it is really compelling. I'm also just a story guy. So like, if a game has a great story, I'm kind of invested. I think about like, some of my favorites over the past few years have been like really story heavy. Like I think about like 1000 Times Resist. That game is like 99% a visual novel and the rest of it is like running around. There are some mechanics in it, but it's like not that heavy, right? But I still think it's a great game and I think it's really compelling. There are a lot of like really big AAA games though that I feel are very story driven and kind of mechanic light that don't catch the same sort of flack as things like visual novels or some like more story focused indie games. For example, I think if you look at like God of War or The Last of Us, like those are very, very story driven games. But I feel like I don't hear people complaining about the fact that the story takes center stage for so much of those games in the same way that people talk about like visual novels or something like 1000 Times Resist. That said, I do think that this is a perfectly fine opinion to have. It's not what I agree with. It's not why I play games. You know, I am here to experience those stories and experience like gaming as an art form to like try and make you feel things, you know what I mean? But like if you are someone who just focuses on playing, you know, Call of Duty multiplayer and like Breath of the Wild, you know, very story light experiences, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think like it's not like you're cutting out like all of the best games in the world, because like I said, Breath of the Wild's on there. Like Call of Duty multiplayer is in my opinion like inarguably great. Like you're still gonna have a good time with gaming. It's just like I am looking for something a little bit more resonant when I play video games. And so as a result, I don't mind if a game is really story focused and kind of mechanic light. The first Red Dead Redemption is superior to Red Dead Redemption 2. The Last of Us Part 1 doesn't count as a remake. I'm gonna skip over the Red Dead part, so if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know in the comments below. But I wanna talk about the Last of Us remake thing. I think that The Last of Us Part 1 is the perfect game to use as an example when trying to showcase how blurry the line between a remaster and a remake is. For all intents and purposes, The Last of Us Part 1 is like pound for pound the exact same as The Last of Us like original or remastered or whatever. It just has those improved visuals, you know what I mean? And as much as, you know, they talked about like, okay, we rebuilt this game from the ground up and all that, like it is like exactly the same as the original, which I think is kind of a shame because I wish that Naughty Dog and whatever, you know, additional studios worked on the game. I think Ben did some work there. I wish that they had taken some swings at maybe reimagining the game a little bit more in the way that we've seen like all these remakes, you know, like Resident Evil 4 or Silent Hill 2 or whatever, like take some steps to kind of try and reimagine the game for like modern audiences. I kind of wish that something had been done to that game in the same sort of vein. Now, The Last of Us 1, I mean, like plays just fine. Like the remastered version also looks great. The original version looks great. It's not the type of game that I think needed a whole like modernization sort of like overhaul, because it's also like kind of what shaped a lot of modern games, especially those like AAA Sony games. But I agree that like calling it a remake is like, it is technically, but in terms of like what it actually is offering, it's not. It is a visual overhaul, right? It's a visual remaster, but it's like really messy, right? Because to my understanding, a remake is a game that is built from the ground up based on, you know, a pre-existing title. So you look at, you know, the recent Silent Hill 2 remake, that is obviously not taking anything from the original games like code and whatever. Like Bloober completely made everything new from scratch for that remake, right? But then we have the Demon's Souls remake, which is literally built on the code from the original Demon's Souls on the PS3 from like 2008 or 9 or whatever, but it's called the Demon's Souls remake. Do you see what I mean? So yes, I do think I agree with you that The Last of Us Part 1 shouldn't really count as a remake, it should count more as a remaster. Horizon Zero Dawn doesn't do anything bad, but for some reason, it's the most boring game I've ever played. We got another response here about Horizon as well, saying Horizon Zero Dawn is boring and bland. It's just good because it has amazing visuals, but the game and story is weak. So I'm known around these parts as the Horizon series' biggest hater. I really do not like those two games. And I think my distaste for that series is actually really highlighted very well in those two comments. Like, I don't think there's anything like really egregiously bad about them. I just think they're boring.
And that's bad enough.
In my opinion, they're completely bland open world games with completely bland characters, except for Jarl. He looks great with a beard, and I wish he kept it for the whole rest of that game. But I think that the Horizon series is a textbook case of great in concept, bad in execution. Like, you were using a bow and arrow to shoot off tiny little pieces of giant robots that are constantly charging you and attacking you and like whipping their bodies around really violently. Like, for me, it just doesn't work at all because they're just constantly backpedaling and I'm missing all my shots and whatever. Maybe that's a skill issue, but like, I don't think it is. On top of that, I just don't find any of the writing or storytelling to be particularly strong.
Chain Scrape is open for business.
Yay.
I don't like Aloy as a character, and I don't think that Ashley Birch's performance as her is very good, which is surprising because I like Ashley Birch in pretty much everything else that she's a part of. That all said, as far as like looking good, the Horizon series is like extremely gorgeous, but like at this point in you know, PlayStation's lineup of like AAA first party titles, I mean, they all look great. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that The Last of Us and God of War look like any like significantly worse than Horizon. I just think that Horizon is set in a world where there's a lot more saturated color. The first Bioshock is a terrible game. The story is good enough, but predicated on hardcore political bias. The moral choices are nonsense, and the gameplay is generic and trite. I think that Bioshock is a great example of old games being old. What I mean by that is, you know, a lot of people talk about like Bioshock as being one of the best games of all time and most influential and all that sort of stuff. But like, if you went back and played it for the first time, like now in 2024, I do think that you would be a little surprised at how rudimentary a lot of the stuff is. I will agree and say that I think that the combat in Bioshock 1 has never been anything that's like super excellent to write home about. I do like the plasmids and the powers there, but like, yeah, the gunplay isn't incredible, and I do think that I wish the game went a little bit further with sort of the interplay with the plasmids and the ways that you can interact with the environment. I'm not going to speak at length about like the political commentary that the game sort of gets into, but like, I mean, to say it has political biases, I just think it's silly because like, yeah, it's a work of fiction that explores like an economic system. Like, yeah, there's going to be some politics in there, especially because it is sort of made to be in conversation with, what is it, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, like an extraordinarily political book. Like, yeah, it's gonna have something to say about politics. Also, I'll say this, and then I'm gonna get off my soapbox here. Like, yeah, there's political bias because it's made by a person, and we all have our own political biases. But this one is explicitly trying to talk about politics. So yeah, it's gonna have hardcore political bias. Like, it's about that. I also think that in terms of like moral choices, yes, I do agree that like the choices are extremely simple. I think like you don't even get any choices in the story. It's just through like whether you're gonna harvest the little sisters or like save them, which yeah, is not a very like compelling choice. Like, do you want to kill a small child for power or not do that? But I think at the time, that was kind of compelling for what video games were doing. And so it did inspire so many different like more like moral choice systems in games. But you look at something like Infamous, which is sort of the next step where, you know, in the story, you're making these choices about being a good guy or bad guy. You know, the choices are like still like kind of comically good or bad.
I never asked for this.
But I think you can see how Bioshock sort of like was the first stepping stone to pave the way for a lot of the games that have more complex moral choices that we see today. Stuff like Until Dawn or any of the Telltale games. I think Bioshock is one of many games that suffers from the problem of being extraordinarily influential at the time, but just it's not something that holds up particularly well right now. Not really a hot take, but I just think that The Elder Scrolls 6 will be mid at best considering the current state of Bethesda, and that The Elder Scrolls 6 has probably gone through development hell. Hope I get proved wrong though. You know, I have gone back and forth on like my feelings about The Elder Scrolls 6 a lot since Starfield came out a year ago. I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan. I don't really care for Fallout, so like I wouldn't call myself as like a huge Bethesda fan, but I had really high expectations for Starfield because, you know, they had been cooking for what, like 6 full years, maybe 7 years, on like Starfield specifically following the release of Fallout 4. And then that game came out and like it did not resonate with me. It felt extremely like clunky. It felt extremely outdated. But above all else, I think it felt really disjointed for me. You know, like every single thing was a loading screen. And like I know that like that's just how a lot of open world games are, but it felt like especially egregious with what that game was going for, right? But that's not what this hot take is about. This hot take is about the Elder Scrolls 6. Now, this might just be blind faith, but I think that I am less worried about the Elder Scrolls 6 than I was about Starfield, because there were a lot of things that are just like inherent to the concept of Starfield that I just can't see being issues with the Elder Scrolls 6. So like for me, that game, as I said, felt really disjointed because like you go to a place, you talk to a person, they say, hey, go talk to this person over here. And then so, you know, you go through 9 different loading screens to fly to a place, and like the flying isn't compelling. When you get to that place, like if you have to do combat, the combat just isn't very compelling. There's just like a lot of like downtime running around between different places without really like a whole lot of like interesting things to look at, to do, to sort of catch your attention while you're going between those different things. The Elder Scrolls isn't gonna have that problem, at least I don't think, because you look at the way that the world of like Skyrim or Oblivion or even Morrowind are like populated, and as you're going from one place to the next, like you are going to run into like a whole lot of other stuff, because you, first of all, are never going to be running in a straight line, and second of all, because the open world is one cohesive world and not broken up into like a million small tiny little pieces in the way that Starfield was, I think that that is going to do a lot to fix those problems for me, just because they won't exist, right? You're running around an open world. There's going to be points of interest and things to see and things to do that are going to catch your attention in the way that just like flying out in the infinite nothing of space doesn't do. If the world is interesting to explore, if the stories are interesting, and if, you know, the lore behind those games continues to be excellent, then I'm still like down for it. I just don't know if Bethesda still has the juice, because they felt so confident in Starfield, and like for me it just didn't hit really at all. Last one here, the Uncharted series is overrated. Strong agree. I don't dislike Uncharted, and I think I just want to put that out there right now. I don't dislike Uncharted, but I think that it is a series that just does not resonate with me at all. Those games are, in my opinion, a really good emulation of like big, dumb action movies, where you eat your popcorn, you watch, you have a really good time, but when the movie is over, you just never think about it again. For me, that's how Uncharted is. When it comes to like recommending games on like PlayStation specifically, I'm gonna recommend about a million other games before I touch Uncharted. I think the first Uncharted suffers from the same problem with Bioshock, where no one had ever really done, you know, a third-person action game that has this like protagonist who's like always talking and sort of like making these like cheeky jokes and stuff like that. But like going back to it, my goodness, I don't like that at all.
I'm sweating like a hooker in church.
You brought a hooker to church?
Why not?
I think the writing is good. I mean, I think especially the last one has some excellent writing in it, but the characters just don't really resonate with me at all. Again, they're fine action games, but I put them in the category sort of with Gears of War for me, where it's just not a series that like speaks to me on any level. They're fun, and I like to play them, and like, you know, if they did another Uncharted game, like I would be interested to see where they went with it, but it's not something that like I sit back and go like, wow, I feel seen by this game. You know what I'm saying? And I'm happy that Naughty Dog has moved on from Uncharted. I think that's sort of what they've said, that like, hey, we're not going back to Uncharted right now. We are continuing with Last of Us stuff. We're continuing with, you know, this new IP that they're working on. But like, I'm happy to hear that they're going to keep doing The Last of Us, something that really resonates with me. And, you know, I'm excited to see what they try next as well. I just want to say this again. I don't think Uncharted is bad. I just don't really like it that much. And that's okay. So those are the hottest takes that I found in our comment sections this week. If you have a hot take that you want me to react to, make sure you let me know in the comments down below, or if you just want to like react to my reaction or react to any of the hot takes that I just read, like please do that. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, make sure you like and subscribe and check out any of the other content here on The Gamer. Bye.